Hello, guys, and welcome to my Tennessee Titans 7 round mock drafts. Since we are 37 days away from the first round of the NFL draft, I am going to do a video on every single team and just go in their verbatim order from here until essentially we run out of teams, obviously, and do 7 rounds. I am going to have up on Ourlads the team depth chart, or what the projected depth chart is of like the new additions to teams, so I can see who they've acquired in free agency and what the team is looking like, as my only tool besides what we see on PFF, obviously, right here. Now, if you guys want to follow team signings, depth charts, and like depth and that sort of thing, I think that Ourlads is a great resource. I used it when I was looking for potential free agents, what teams are going to be lacking, and all of that. But you can obviously, it has a color coded system, and it's a great system. I'll link Ourlads in the description below because I think it's a nice website. But otherwise, without further ado, we're going to start the draft. And I'm going to try to do this as realistic as I would in real life to do the best possible draft, for each and every team. But starting off with the number 1 overall pick, I am going to take Cam Ward. It seems kind of inevitable that this is going to happen. Obviously, now, between Cam Ward and then the, second round pick 35, which is the third pick in the second round, we can obviously like look here and see, the full draft and look who was grabbed. Travis Hunter, number 2, Abdul Kauder, number 3, Mason Graham, and that sort of thing. And it's like, you look at, what this team needs, and it's like they grabbed a couple linebackers in free agency, a free safety. I do think that they have a pretty stacked corner room. But obviously, the other thing that you think about with the Titans is that these guys really need a wide receiver. Calvin Ridley being the only guy to really kind of produce. And I think that, you look at Ridley, he was playing at a pretty good level. I think Treylon Burks has ultimately been a disappointment. And it's like, you look at kind of who's available for wide receivers and that sort of thing. And it's like, get a guy, that's strong, that's big. I think that you're looking at a wide receiver right here. I think that their O-line could use some work. They did sign Kevin Zeitler, and that sort of thing. Obviously, they did sign Brandon Allen as well to the roster, who's a QB, likely to be a backup, obviously. And then it's like you kind of do look at, tight end as well, because their best tight end is Chig Okonkwo. And sorry if you're a fan of his, but he, to me, he just does, I don't know much about him, and he doesn't do it for me. So it's like you're looking, maybe for a tight end who's going to be your guy. I don't think it's Elijah Arroyo. Maybe you're not drafting one at this point because you've got like rank 70s, and all the good tight ends are kind of off the board. Now looking, at this, it's like, what do you go for? There's also running backs. I think this is a good running back. And it's like, I think that Tyjae Spears could be better behind a better O-line, but then you have Tony Pollard, who is kind of, that sort of thing. So it's like, looking at this, I'm just kind of thinking that like this is a team that needs, they still have Jeffrey Simmons. They still have a pretty good defense, to be honest with you. So it's like this team needs offensive firepower, and it's like you're either taking Jack Beck or Alec Ayamanor here. And it's like, I do like Jack Beck a lot. Big contested catch, good size, big, still pretty, pretty solid and that sort of thing. I think this is a guy that they could take on Tennessee. So it's like making that pick. We go all the way down to the first pick in round 4, and at this point you are kind of looking, you're at pick 103. You've got, Devin Neal halfback. If you're going to double down on wide receiver, I mean, you definitely could. Isaiah Bond, obviously a smaller, speedier guy. So it's like, maybe this guy could be a dude. And I'm actually going to say it. I say you take Isaiah Bond and you double down on wide receiver because you have another pick. You have another pick, just a little while further in the 4th. So it's not like you're handcuffing yourself by doubling down on wide receiver. You're addressing a guy. Is there really anybody here at edge? So it's like run defense on Ahmad Hassan is good. Pass rush win rate is actually pretty good. I think that this guy, grades pretty well in the Boise State Broncos, and he's a good size, a very good size with a lot of experience being a senior. I'm going to have him take Ahmad Hassanein here. Sorry if I butchered the name. Going down to round 5, pick 3 in this round. I'm, looking at who's available. Obviously, you've got some quarterbacks here, which they obviously don't need, but then you do have a tight end available out of Georgia. Contested win rate isn't great, run block grade. I just think that, this is a guy that it's like he didn't see heavy usage, he's athletic enough and, that sort of thing. Perhaps he is a guy that you go and you potentially grab, who's kind of your like wild card draftee, type of situation because you need a tight end. You need a tight end that could maybe come in and be your guy and that sort of thing. Moving on, we've only got, 3 picks left, 2 in the 6th, this one in the 5th. I think at this point, you are kind of looking for maybe depth, maybe a little, something, to, put you over the edge. Maybe now is when you look for a halfback, in my opinion. Maybe there's one here that, you've got Kyle Monangai, out of Rutgers, Marcus Yarns out of, Delaware. A lot of smaller schools besides, I guess, Oregon, but it's like, who here fits? Is there a guy who, obviously not this guy, very, smaller. You kind of want a big bodied guy to be a power dude. And it's like yards after contact. This looks like the guy that you would maybe want, even though, I guess, wow, he does only weigh 183, perhaps. Not playing any top schools, it's just poor tackling. So I don't know if you'd go with Marcus Yarns, to be honest. And now we're kind of reaching going this low. Are any of these guys the bigger bodied type? 210, maybe? Or is it Jordan James? Another 210, going to be 21 next year. And that sort of thing. Let's look at the stats for him. Playing several big schools and having, consistency. Consistency here to me is really good. The gap grade is good. Yards after contact, solid. And it's like, has been pretty good these last 2 years, only getting better with more use and more experience. I would take Jordan James if you're the Titans. And he's available down in the 5th round. Now on to the 6th round. We got 2 picks here. You probably address defense. I really don't think the defense was any sort of issue on the Titans. I think their lack of offense caused the defense to get exposed, get banged up throughout the year through too much play time. And I think that the biggest help you can provide for a defense like this is maybe an edge rusher, which we grabbed earlier, obviously. We address that need, but perhaps you do draft, a fresh linebacker or a fresh, oh goodness, you draft a fresh linebacker, and it's like, who are you going to draft? It doesn't look like anybody is going to be taken kind of at this level from the linebacker position, but it's like maybe you are going to go with perhaps safeties. I mean, you have Amani Hooker and Xavier Woods just signed. And Amani Hooker, I think you kind of know what you have with him. Perhaps you're looking at somebody, who can come in and be kind of an option guy. And Ransaw, nickel defender, perhaps you bring him in to, get disguise look. I think that, that could help. I think that, Tennessee, it's like, you start by stopping the run, and a guy like that who's physical can do that. Now looking for the last pick here, I'm going to look to linebacker again because several were kind of even lower than this, but it's your last pick. You kind of take like the position of need, and, maybe who you need is a guy that's no scouting summary on this guy. Let's see here. Keeps on sliding down, I guess, draft boards, who graded very well, a good amount of snaps, more the year prior, one less game, but good amount of tackles, assisted tackles, missed tackles, coverage snaps, but was very good in coverage. Now I know that Cody Barden is solid all around, but then you look at Draymond Jones and then it's like Otis Reese the fourth. You could definitely add competition, and it's like Jay Higgins here is kind of a guy that I'm looking at now, and it's like this looks like it would be a player that would be good for them. I guess they hate the Jordan James pick, but then overall, this to me looks like an overall draft grade of a B. I bottom 30% of their drafts. To me, I think that this looks like it kind of addresses most of their needs. And, nothing crazy. I guess Jordan James was such a reach or whatever else. But it's like, I think that, you could have reversed these two and whatever. But it's like, overall, I think that this addresses kind of what Tennessee needs, and I think that they need to kind of add more talent on offense, and that's going to help their defense. But if you guys have any sort of like takes on this or what you think and whether or not I'm wrong, they could possibly go without a halfback. Perhaps Tyjae Spears could develop more and be more of an impact. I just don't think that they used him right last year. But it's like, who knows? With a new system, under place, with the hiring of a new head coach, you could maybe what they have is enough. But based on what I saw last year, the best way to help the defense for this team is to draft some offense to actually be able to sustain drives, and hopefully Cam Ward can do that. I guess I didn't address O-line very much, but I honestly don't think that their O-line was kind of the problem last year. They added Dan Moore Jr., Peter Skoronski is a pretty good left guard. Lloyd Cushenberry, which was an overpay, I don't think it matters as much. Kevin Zeitler from Detroit, he will be a much appreciated. And then J.C. Latham, I don't think is as bad as you could be. It was really just the poor decision making of Will Levis last year to me. And it's like, I was still kind of a believer that potentially they would move on, but it seems more and more likely that they want to get their guy, so to speak, you know, much like a lot of GMs and head coaches do when a new regime takes over. And that it does seems to be it does seems to be the way that, you know, it kind of goes nowadays. So, you know, tell me what you think, you guys, you know, and you know, leave a like if you like this kind of content. Like I said, I'll be doing one of these every single day. You know, perhaps, you know, some days I might release two, but you know, it's one of those things that, you know, it'll be fun to kind of see, you know, how these rosters can fill, you know, doing 7 rounds for every single team over the next, you know, 32 days or 31 days now after this one's uploaded. But thank you guys for watching, and as always, go Pack Go.